Hello, fellow citizens! I am your host, Jess, and this is your reminder that the weight of the entire world is not on your shoulders, and you can make a difference. This podcast is about what it means to be a citizen and neighbor where you live. For me, that's Philadelphia. There are lots of ways to be a citizen and a neighbor, and I want to cover all of them in this podcast, starting with the belief that citizens should be informed. Because of our current nationwide agenda, I'm kicking off the podcast by examining the candidates and roles on the 2020 general election ballot. I don't know about you, but I was raised that you don't talk about politics at the dinner table, which I kind of translated to be like, you don't talk about politics like in public or with family. But I think we're going to change that because today I'm joined by one of my two sisters-in-law. Colleen is here to talk about the Delaware ballot. Hi,
Yay.
Colleen.
Hi.
Are you scared? Are you enthusiastic? Are you nervous?
I'm enthusiastic.
That's awesome. I'm really happy to hear that. So like I said, you're here to talk about the Delaware ballot. Where all have you lived in your life, Colleen?
I have lived in Delaware my whole life.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Is it cool?
I guess. No. I'm ready to move out. We just haven't yet.
Do you think you've seen a lot of changes while you've been in Delaware?
No, I don't think so. I think it's kind of been like generally the same. I mean, it's changes in like infrastructure and everything and things growing, but as far as like mindsets and everything, I kind of feel like it's generally been the same.
Yeah. So we're in a pandemic, Colleen. I don't know if anybody told you.
I have no idea.
How are you spending your time these days?
So I currently have been spending my time just raising my new puppy, and then also applying to new jobs as well.
Yeah, so you were part of the flight attendants, right? You are a flight attendant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're just not flying right now.
No, I'm currently furloughed, so hopefully maybe I'll get my job back at some point, but not right now.
So you had a little more time than usual to look at the ballot and like figure this out. How long would you say you've been voting?
I have been voting since I've turned 18. This is my second presidential election that I'm going through. And because I registered as independent, I've only done like the major elections. I haven't been able to participate in the primaries.
Can you tell our listeners how old you are?
I'm 24 years old. Yeah! So I participated in the 2016 election and then now the 2020.
That's awesome. And do you consider yourself informed on a local level?
I think I'm somewhat informed on the local level. Last election, I didn't really do too much searching and researching about all the candidates that were available on the local level, but I did some skimming of like the major candidates that are more towards my sort of views and kind of just went with those people. But this election, I'm doing a little bit more.
How much time would you say you put into either researching for today or for this election in general?
Today, I put in an hour or two of researching, but after going through this information, it makes me want to research more about everybody else, actually, because I just didn't know about other candidates that I wouldn't have wouldn't have voted for to begin with anyway. So,
do you know off the top of your head how many things you have to vote on your ballot?
This year? No.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple like district level, and then the Senate, obviously, and I think maybe a House representative as well, but
yeah, I think you might have like 12 lines to vote on because you guys have this like city commission or like, I don't know. It's pretty wild in Delaware.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different smaller level people that, one, I'm not sure of like if I live in the right area to vote for them or if they're available for everybody too.
Right. Delaware's small, but there's people living there. So they got to get represented.
Yep.
So today we're talking about the U.S. Senator position, because there's Congress and then there's General Assembly. So today we're talking about the senators in Congress. We're only going to go over two candidates because there's four, and we're limited on time. We're getting closer and closer to the election. So we're going to talk about the two big names. But first, I'm going to explain to our listeners what is a U.S. Senator. So a U.S. Senator, as a member of the upper chamber of U.S. Congress, regulates interstate commerce, interstate communication, interstate transportation, the U.S. Mint, and the supply of money. The U.S. Congress creates courts and declares war on foreign countries. The primary function of a U.S. Senator is to make laws. Senators are assigned to serve on committees in which they review bills or proposed laws. Each committee focuses on a different topic, including budget, health, education, foreign relations, transportation, and homeland security. Once a bill is passed in committee, all senators are responsible for voting on it. The Senate also has the power to impeach the president. Like every other state, Delaware elects 2 U.S. senators serving staggered 6-year terms. So right now we're voting on one of those Senate seats. So we do have an incumbent who is Chris Coons. So Colleen, if you're cool with it, I'm going to read his bio, and then we're going to really get into it with some Q&As. Are you ready for this?
I'm so ready. I can't wait.
All right. So Chris Coons is a graduate of Amherst College with his bachelor's degree in chemistry and political science, taking a semester to study abroad at the University of Nairobi in Kenya. Wow. He earned a law degree from Yale Law School while simultaneously earning a master's degree in ethics from Yale Divinity School. Chris worked as an attorney for Delaware-based W. Gore & Associates, an innovative science-based business where he helped the company expand. Chris previously worked for the I Have a Dream Foundation, helping at-risk youth stay in school, get to college, and build their lives, and with the National Coalition for the Homeless. Chris spent a decade of successful service in New Castle County government as New Castle County Council President and New Castle County Executive. He earned a reputation for delivering real results on behalf of Delawareans, preserving critical community services while protecting the county's finances during the least stable national economic climate in decades. Senator Chris Coons has earned a reputation as a principled, progressive, and pragmatic lawmaker, focused on some of the most important issues confronting Delaware and the nation. His commitment to making a difference for everyday Americans has earned Chris praise from the Washington Post, which recently proclaimed that Chris has emerged as a thoughtful senator and is one of the senators who makes you feel good about politics. By the way, this is from his campaign page, which is why it sounds very much in favor of him. He serves on several committees, including the Appropriations Committee, Judiciary Committee, Foreign Relations Committee, Small Business Committee, and the Ethics Committee. He lives in Wilmington with his wife Annie and their 3 children. So, we got to do a deep dive on Chris Coons, and we're going to go to the vote411.org page. You can put in your address and it'll show you your sample ballot. There's a handful of questions on here, so we're going to go through them one by one, and if we feel like anything needs explaining, we'll just figure it out together. So, Colleen, to Christopher Coons, what motivated you to seek or continue in this office? Do you have it up?
Oh, yeah. So I'm reading this. Okay.
Yeah.
So it says, I'm running for re-election to the U.S. Senate because I want to continue fighting for Delawareans and our collective values. For the past 3 years, we fought as the Trump administrated gutted environmental regulations, separated children from their parents at the border, and closed our nation's doors to refugees, rolled back civil rights protections, put the interests of for-profit colleges ahead of students, and attempted to end the Affordable Care Act. This is a critical time in Delaware and the US, and I want to continue helping entrepreneurs access capital and fighting for small business owners. I want to lead renewed efforts, hopefully with a new Biden administration, to address climate change, pass gun safety legislation, and expand voting rights. Most importantly, I want to keep working to help all Delawareans make the government work for them and solve our residents' most pressing needs, from ensuring veterans secure their earned benefits to expediting SSA claims and more.
Okay, so I have a question. You've been in Delaware your whole life, and now we're in a pandemic. Do you, like, feel that it's weird and, like, so many small businesses are closed? Like, does that, as a consumer, has that affected you?
I haven't noticed that. I've noticed that small businesses that have multiple locations have closed some of their locations temporarily. That, like in Newark, where I live, it's a college town, and there's a lot of students that aren't living on campus right now. And there's a couple businesses on Main Street that have businesses there, but then also ones in Wilmington, and they kept the Wilmington ones open but closed or have limited hours to the ones in Newark.
Do you think that's just because, like, Newark is it more of a college area, and so there's not many kids there right now?
Yeah, especially in, like, the downtown area of Newark, which is it's a main street with shops and restaurants along it. And yeah, it's mainly ran by the students that are there. And when there's no students there, it's a much, much quieter, much slower area than it is in Wilmington.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So did his answer to that first question, like, make you ask anything, or do you think it's still a little too general at this point?
I think it's pretty general and just kind of overviewing all, like, I think the Democratic Party in general has a very big umbrella, and it's just hitting all the checks for that party, basically, to make everybody happy.
Yeah, so we're going to try to get a little bit more information. So question 2 says, what are your primary goals for the coming year? Can you read Chris Coons' answer?
Yeah, so our country is in the middle of 3 crises: the COVID-19 pandemic, the economic fallout of that pandemic, and a renewed awareness of systemic racial injustice. All 3 crises affect Delawareans across our state, regardless of their backgrounds. Congress can and must do more to provide the critical resources needed, including testing, contact tracing, personal protective equipment. Additionally, Washington must provide all Delaware families with enhanced unemployment insurance, protections from evictions and foreclosures, and assistance to make it through the financial crisis brought on by this pandemic. It is my goal to work together to address all 3 crises. I believe we can rise to the moment before us and bring this pandemic under control while creating a more just and equitable country for all Delawareans. One that addresses long ignored systemic racism/injustice, bolsters meaningful enforcement of fair housing rules, strengthens voting rights, and heals the economy.
Cool. Do you have any response to that?
So I think that, it hits all the points that are, like, important in our lives in the current 2020. Mm-hmm. But I think it also just, like, is really just thinking about everything that has happened in 2020. And that's mainly what that's focused on right now. And I think that's what's on a lot of people's minds in general.
Yeah. It's interesting, the answers. Like, when we get to the next question, he does give more specific answers to him personally, and I think that's what's always interesting with these Q&As is, like, you have to keep in mind that a lot of people are learning about you as a candidate and what you're doing for the first time, and so I would rather have, like, too much information than not enough.
Exactly. I agree. Go into too much detail, please.
Yeah, so hopefully that's what we have now. So the next question says, please explain the policies, if any, you support to address gun violence in America.
So, thoughts and prayers are not enough. I'm proud to have been endorsed by Everytown for Gun Safety, the Giffords PAC, and Brady United because I am committed to passing responsible legislation to keep our communities and citizens safe. I'm also proud to be a gun sense candidate and work with members of Moms Demand Action, the Delaware chapter, to pass critical legislation in DC and Dover. I'm leading efforts to truly enforce our existing background check laws through the NICS Denial Notification Act, a bill that will ensure that anytime a prohibited person lies on a background check form and tries to buy a gun, law enforcement is notified. This short bill would close a gaping loophole in 34 states, including Delaware. I'm also sponsoring several important gun safety measures, including the Safe Gun Storage Act of 2019, the Gun Violence Prevention Research Act, 3D Printed Gun Safety Act of 2019, the Background Check Expansion Act, and the Assault Weapons Ban of 2019.
Yeah, and I think I can find a link. There's a way where you can actually get more information about all these acts, like see exactly what the verbiage is, when it was last voted on, because unfortunately sometimes they just like sit in committee. And a lot of these say 2019. So I guess that means it was passed in 2019. I don't know. I don't know if it was passed in 2019 or they wrote it in 2019.
I think it was they were wrote because I looked up the Assault Weapons Ban Act and it kind of looks like it hasn't really been voted on yet and hasn't been brought to anybody. It's just kind of like been written, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot to keep up on.
Yeah.
I did see that one of them where you can follow these. You can sign up to be notified when there's movement on any of these, which I think is pretty cool.
Oh, that is cool.
Yeah, if you want to be like kept in the know instead of having to go look for it.
Yeah. And especially if there's one in particular that you're that's important to you and that you're interested on, instead of like constantly being bombarded with text message notifications of like, oh, this has been updated. This has been updated.
Right. Yeah. The gun issue is a really big thing this year, which is, I mean, it's always been a big thing.
Yeah. I think there just should always be more. It's better to have too much regulation on guns, I feel like, than not enough.
Right. Sometimes more is better.
Yeah.
So now we're getting into the COVID questions. It says, what do you see as the best path to recovery of the U.S. economy following the COVID-19 crisis? What role, if any, should legislative actions play in recovery efforts?
So we need to invest in American families, which means providing continued financial support, enhanced unemployment insurance, and passing a pandemic relief package that will provide states, local governments, and schools with the resources they need. We also need to continue fighting for equity for all Delawareans by ensuring that business assistance is available through community banks and other community development financial institutions. As we are able to safely reopen more of our economy, I will continue to support American manufacturing and innovation, as well as entrepreneurs and small business owners. Elected officials may not create private sector jobs, but we can pass legislation and provide resources that support an environmentally resilient, innovative, and entrepreneurial economy. We can support increased workforce development and accessible, high-quality education for all children. With strong leadership and collective determination, we will overcome this together.
Yeah, and he's on the small business committee, so when he's talking about actually making stuff happen, he actually is like on the committee that would make stuff happen.
Yeah, exactly.
And all right, we've got 2 questions left. What federal policies or actions do you support that would reduce the impact of climate change?
So Delaware is the nation's lowest lying state and at great risk of the damages of climate change. That's why I'm leading strong climate change legislation to reduce carbon emissions and adopt sustainable, clean energy solutions. I'm also the founder of the first bipartisan Climate Solutions Caucus, and I'm proud to have earned the endorsements of the Sierra Club, League of Conservation Voters, National Wildlife Federation Action Fund, and others. I'm also deeply concerned about environmental justice and the disparate impacts of climate change on poor communities in Delaware and worldwide. That's why I'm a co-sponsor of Senator Cory Booker's Environmental Justice Act of 2019. Most recently, I passed a bipartisan bill to promote sustainable chemistry and introduced legislation to cut energy costs for homeowners and save energy efficiency jobs. It's imperative we protect our environment, and I'm committed to passing legislation that fights climate change and promotes sustainability.
Wow. There was a lot in that answer.
Yeah, there was.
I think these are pretty good questions.
I think it's good questions and I liked the answer for that one because he kind of went into environmental justice, but also like how climate change affects like the poor communities worldwide and also in Delaware too.
Yeah,
which I think
jobs.
is important. Yeah, which I think is just important to keep in mind when talking about those things.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's a lot in that answer.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I lied before. Now we have 2 more questions. All right, this is a meaty one, which I'm kind of surprised his answer is so small. But What is your position on adopting the Equal Rights Amendment to the U.S. Constitution? If you favor it, how do you believe the time limit originally set for its adoption should be handled?
So I fully support the Equal Amendments Right and am a sponsor of Senate Joint Resolution 6, which would eliminate the deadline for ratification of the ERA. Separately, I am proud to have been endorsed by several women's rights organizations, and I will continue to fight for women and their rights in the U.S. Senate. So that is very short.
Should we dive more into that now or when we get to the other candidate?
I think when we get into the other candidate, because I think her response is interesting to the question. So
yeah, I agree. So now we're on our last question for Chris Coons, who's the incumbent. Do you see any need for campaign finance reform? Please explain.
I strongly support campaign finance reform. I have sponsored several bills focused on campaign finance reform, including a proposed constitutional amendment to repeal the Citizens United decision, which protects unlimited, undisclosed, outside spending in elections. I am also a sponsor of the Disclose Act of 2019, the For the People Act of 2019, the SHIELD Act to prevent foreign interference in our elections, and the Fair Elections Now Act. I'm also proud to have earned the support of End Citizens United PAC, a leading campaign finance reform advocacy organization.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of sources where you can see who supports these candidates financially. So that's another there's a lot of information that's accessible out there. You just have to know where to look and know that that's accessible.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else to say on Chris Coons before we move on?
No, I think he just kind of does have the Delawareans' best interests in mind and kind of moving forward and making things better instead of kind of just staying with the status quo or going back.
Looking up, he is pretty active with Delawareans, and I think that's something that when it comes to your representative, some people don't realize how easy it is to access them. I know when I used to see stuff where they call your representative, email your representative, write a letter to your representative, and I'm like, who is this person? Why do they care what I have to say?
Yeah.
And now that I'm actually reading who these people are, some of them really do respond to you. He actually got an email from an anonymous USPS worker about some machines barcode machines at the post office that had actually been taken out of the building and put outside the building like they were trash, and they were sitting in the rain for a while. And so this employee contacted Chris Coons and was like, hey, this is what's going on. Like, there's some shady shit going on. Like, somebody needs to come and see what's happening because they're trying to cover this up. And he called right away, or his spokesperson called that specific post office right away and was like trying to show up and get a tour to see what was going on. And they were trying to be like, oh no, like, you have to talk to management about scheduling to come here. You can't just show up on the whim, which is like suspicious. And this anonymous worker like kept emailing him like, oh, now that they know you want to come, like, they're trying to clean stuff up and they're trying to tape down the floor tiles that are covering the asbestos. And I was like, what?
Oh
like,
my
it
God.
was bonkers. And so he did go there. Like, you can find a video. I think I'll find it. I'll put it in the episode description. But he posted a video and he was like, I'm here at this particular post office building and they just like threw this thing out to the trash. And I was listening to I forget if it was NPR or WHYY, which is our Philly station, and they covered that incident, and then they sent one of their journalists to go to that post office, and the journalist was able to just like walk in willy-nilly, and he's like, if I wanted to, I could just take something and nobody's here.
Oh my God.
So I just thought, like, my point is just that, like, a citizen emailed Chris Coons' people and they, you know, looked into it and took it seriously and were like, okay, like, let's just like go to this post office and see what's going on. They weren't immediately like, okay, what the citizen is telling us must be 100% true. They were just like, let's just investigate it.
Yeah.
So I thought that was cool.
No, that is cool. It's nice that he's actually like going out and checking things out versus just like either taking somebody's word for it or just ignoring it in general too.
Yeah, and even when you are on the Congress level, you still live in your area. So like I said, like he lives in Wilmington, so he's here, he's accessible. We'll see if he stays in the Senate, because one of his opponents is Lauren Whitke, and she answered the Q&A on Vote 411. She has extra answers on ballotpedia.org. So I'm going to read her bio. I believe I got all of this from her campaign page. So it says, Lauren Whitke is a Delaware native from Sussex County, graduate of Goldie Beacom Business College with a degree in business management and former program director of Teen Challenge, a nonprofit whose mission is to provide adults and teens freedom from addiction and other life-controlling issues through Christ-centered solutions. Lauren is a young, passionate conservative who spent several years working in the pharmaceutical industry. Lauren unwittingly participated in the pharmaceutical industry's agenda, which led to the nationwide opioid addiction crisis. Ironically, she found herself hopelessly addicted as well, and even worked for drug cartel families and illicit organized crime gangs from Detroit. Girl, spill the tea. Lauren traveled across the United States, overcame her addiction, and brings a first-hand perspective to the issues at hand. She offers real solutions on how to fix the opioid crisis. After President Trump was elected in 2016, Lauren completely changed the course of her life and dedicated her life to joining the fight to make America great again, as opposed to enabling those who wish to destroy America. She made the decision to fight for her own recovery as well as the recovery of our nation. Lauren understands the various causes and contributing factors to the crisis and knows how to fix it. She will address the immigration problem and restore family values. She understands the value of faith-based solutions for recovery. The globalist, open border agenda has no intent on saving Americans from the opioid crisis. The opioid of the masses for them has become literal opioids. Lauren Whitke is a problem solver and is unapologetically America first. And that's from her campaign page. So we're going to compare by going over the same questions from Vote 411. Do you have any reactions to that before we get into the questions? Or do you want to
I think it's very crazy that a Senate candidate worked for drug cartel families, and she's pretty young. So,
She is, yeah.
like, how long ago was that? And yeah, it's just very interesting.
She's had a life.
She has, that is for sure.
So we're going to get to know her a little more. And also, like, I just want to remind our listeners, like, we're just trying to, like, present who these candidates are. And for some people can relate to these candidates, and for them, this is the right choice. So we're doing our best to stay unbiased. We're trying.
Yes.
So question 1 of Vote 411 says, what motivated you to seek or continue in this office?
So Chris Coons is a prime example of a politician who has lost touch with the American people. I decided to pursue the seat for U.S. Senate because initially I saw that Delaware was crumbling to drug addiction, broken families, and broken communities. The elite class of politicians have made it as difficult as possible for millennials and Generation Z to have great jobs, living wages, equity, or even have families. I felt like the system was rigged against us, and a seat in the U.S. Senate will help me implement policies that can restore our families, communities, and our future. The opioid crisis, which affects everyone, has reached epidemic proportions. As someone in recovery, I know how we can fix it. Unlike those who sit in their ivory towers and have not struggled for anything a day in their life, I want to fight for the restoration of our families, make real recovery solutions available and accessible to the public, and make it easier for the younger generation to succeed.
Oh my gosh. I'm always curious why they choose the position that they're running for, because she hasn't held office before this.
Yeah, so it makes me wonder if, like, kind of the same thing when Trump ran for president and people saw him as more relatable because of that, and that he's never been a politician before, that kind of may have trickled down to more of the local level where people are feeling more relatable to people that aren't lifetime politicians or have been in political seats before.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point.
Yeah.
So let's see what else she has to say. If elected, what are your primary goals for the coming year?
So when elected, the first piece of legislation I will draft is to provide federal funding for long-term residential recovery centers. This includes faith-based solutions like the one I graduated from. Long-term residential recovery centers like Teen Challenge have a 70% success rate and also provide an alternative choice for those who are incarcerated to serve their sentences there. Providing real recovery solutions as opposed to just incarceration will help rebuild our communities and give those caught in the realm of addiction/drug dealing an opportunity to unlearn what they have learned and become productive members of society again. The current problem with these recovery centers is that they are always understaffed and underfunded. Imagine what we could accomplish if we could federally fund successful solutions and spread the success in mass. Also, making welfare money available to married couples so mothers can choose to marry and not lose their benefits.
Do you have any reactions to that?
I mean, I think it is important to, have solutions for people that are in recovery or in need of being in recovery. And I also think that it is nice to not incarcerate people that were arrested and put into prison because of a drug addiction, and they can actually get help versus just sitting in a jail cell and suffering, really.
Yeah, this is definitely one situation where her experience is going to be a huge help when people are making decisions. Like, I hope she'll always come back to that experience and like stay humble.
Yeah, I agree.
Should we go to the next one?
Yeah.
Please explain the policies, if any, you support to address gun violence in America.
Gun violence has certainly become a problem, especially in our inner cities. Our inner cities are crumbling because of the breakdown of their families. Since 1965, we have incentivized the breakdown of the nuclear family and removed our fathers from the home. Since then, our crime rates have skyrocketed, including gun violence. Little boys are growing up without strong fathers in the home and lose their way. If we can incentivize marriage and family as opposed to fatherlessness, we can restore a stable society. As a victim of assault, I refuse to submit to any gun legislation that will inhibit my right to bear arms. A well-armed woman is the great equalizer against violent assaults, and to me is a women's right issue.
What do you think of that?
So, I don't think that, one, there's a way to incentivize marriage and family. And I also don't think that just because there isn't a dad in the home doesn't mean that if there's a dad in the home, that doesn't stop gun violence.
She definitely is hinting at a lot of her views here. I thought I was confused because, yeah, she points out like having a father, not having a father changes a lot about the way little boys are raised. I think it obviously depends on like where you're living, like what neighborhood you're in. If you're in a dangerous neighborhood, then I think it might have more of an impact to not have a man in the house and to be raising a small boy, because they might be influenced by their surroundings that maybe aren't the best.
Yeah.
But then it's interesting that she says at the end, like, I believe in the right to bear arms. Like, as a woman, I want to have a gun. So I just thought that was interesting. It's like, well, it sounds then like if there's not a father in the house, then the female in the house needs to just like take on that strength and bear her arms. So that was kind of it was a little confusing for me. But it says a lot about her views, and it was a jam-packed answer.
Yeah, it was. And I think you're right. It is kind of confusing too, because then it kind of makes it sound like if there is a father in the home, there's no need for a gun, versus like if there's not, then, or as a woman, you should have a gun. So it's just kind of.
That's a good point too. Yeah, because I kind of thought her views would have been like if there's a father in the house, they're the one that controls the gun. But then also when we're talking about gun safety, if you're going to have a gun in a house with a family, I'm sure there's lots of different views, but one view is that maybe everybody in the house needs to learn gun safety.
Yeah.
Like if you have kids in the house, they should know where the gun is. They should know how to, like, what the safety is and everything about it, really. Yeah. But that's a big issue. That's a lot to dive into.
Yeah,
gun safety
definitely.
is a lot.
It really is. It really is.
I'm sure like 100 years from now, we're going to look back on gun safety, I hope, and be like, why did it take them so long to figure this out?
Yeah. 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 I agree. I hope so.
Yeah, because we'll kind of get into that more when we get back to the ERA question. But first, we're going to keep talking about COVID. So, what do you see as the best path to recovery of the U.S. economy following the COVID-19 crisis? What role, if any, should legislative actions play in recovery efforts?
Reopen immediately and direct all stimulus aid packages and aid to the small businesses and populace who have been victims of this government overreach. Also, end all foreign guest worker programs to ensure that every American has a job over any foreigner. With 40 plus Americans out of work, there's no reason for the political elite to import more cheap foreign labor to replace us in the workforce. We must get America back to work, and remember, big businesses such as Amazon were the only ones who benefited from the COVID-19 shutdown.
That's the kind of answer when I hear it, I'm like, I gotta do my research. Like, there's a lot that I'm like, oh, that's like a empty. It sounds like if I didn't want to do my research and I took this at face value, I might be missing a lot.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's interesting that she brings up Amazon, because we do have a few Amazon centers in Delaware that does employ a lot of Delawareans. So I think it's interesting that she brought that up, and that Americans need to work, but talks about how Amazon shouldn't be benefiting from Americans, basically.
Yeah, I always
I took
come
it.
to that like personal struggle whenever I hear people are like, "Oh, the big heads up top are like bad people, and so I'm not going to support that business anymore." And I always think like they're not the only people in that business though. Like there's a lot of people like when it comes to Apple, I know a lot of people don't like the head of Apple, and it's like first of all, we're never all going to not give money to Apple. Like at this point that's just
Yeah.
impossible. But
It's like
anytime I
Google.
yeah, exactly. And even Netflix, there's people that are like anti-Netflix these days. And I'm like, that's fine if like you don't like one product or one person involved in that business. But when you get to big businesses, they are offering a lot of jobs. So for her to make a statement like this, it's like you're talking about people.
Yeah, people that need jobs, and I've had plenty of friends that either work for Amazon currently or have worked for Amazon at least at short-term times, and it's a job.
Yeah. Yeah, for some reason, like for us, the two of us, like that statement just like rubs us the wrong way.
Yeah.
I think she should have just like expanded on it more. But I think also like she just knows who her audience is, and she's like, I'm not trying to be nice. I'm not trying to get
Yeah.
everybody to like me. I know who my audience is. I know a lot of people agree with me. And like I was telling you earlier, like I fell down a rabbit hole on YouTube, and she is getting out there. She has been campaigning through this whole thing. She's on a lot of talk shows, a lot of podcasts, which all of them like follow the same agenda. She is Republican. I didn't mention that. I try not to. I'm like, you shouldn't like choose people just because of what party they're in. But once you do your research on her, you'll just like figure it out. She is Republican. And she actually believes that mail-in ballots are a scam. She's very anti mail-in ballot. So if you're gonna vote for Lauren Whitke, like you better go to the polls, or she's gonna be so mad at you. I just like if you're a true Whitke supporter, you will go to the polls.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. What federal policies or actions do you support that would reduce the impact of climate change?
Great strides towards renewable energy hurt our unions and American workers. Protecting American workers first is my priority.
Yeah, and she's not looking to like be on a committee for like climate change or anything,
No.
so I'm not surprised that her answer is really short for this. That's just the truth.
Yeah, and I don't think climate change is something that's one of her important pieces that her voters are looking for either.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. So now we get to the meaty one. What is your position on adopting the Equal Rights Amendment to the U.S. Constitution? If you favor it, how do you believe the time limit originally set for its adoption should be handled?
The wage gap is a myth, according to several of the most predominant economists, like the Foundation of Economic Education. I do not support adopting the Equal Rights Amendment to the U.S. Constitution.
Yeah, and that's just naive because the ERA is not just about wage gap.
Yeah, and as a woman, I feel like you would want equal rights, but I think there's also plenty of women that sort of view things differently about the Equal Rights Amendment, but I think it's
a fascinating...
it's more than just the wage gap, and it's more than just women too.
The ERA is one of the most fascinating things that I've come across lately, because there's a show right now called Mrs. America, and it's fictional, and they focus on the inception of the Equal Rights Amendment, and they do a really great job of showing both sides of it. And so when it was conceptualized in the 70s, the women who were against it were mostly homemakers. And they viewed this saying that if you're a homemaker, if you're a wife who raises the family and does all the baking, that you're not free. And so that was kind of offensive to housewives. And they were like, don't tell me that I'm not free. Like, I'm very happy. But some of them also knew in the back of their minds, they're like, well, because of what rights we have or what little rights we do have, if I wasn't married, if my husband were to leave me, then I would kind of be stuck. because I've depended on this so much, and as a woman, I don't have as many advantages as men do. So I just think it's a very interesting thing. Like, one of the things they said in that show that was sort of the outrageous argument at that time was like, well, if the ERA gets passed, then women can be drafted. And it's like, well, first of all, like, there's not a war coming anytime soon.
Yeah.
And that's still an argument today, is like, there's not a major war, but also things are so different today that there's plenty of women in the forces. Like, it's not this far out idea that women would sign up for something like that. But yeah, there's a lot involved in the ERA, and I just think it's one of the most fascinating things right now.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah, all she talks about is wages, which that's something to really dive deeper into. But just for our listeners to know, the ERA also talks about violence against women, gender-based violence, protecting survivors. Pay discrimination is like a big one. Pregnancy discrimination, which includes people being let go from their jobs too soon while they're pregnant because they're just, whatever job they have, there's just not enough options for them to do as they're farther along in the pregnancy. The ERA also talks about reproductive health, such as access to contraceptives and abortion, and just other safety measures concerning health. Workplace discrimination, racial disparities in maternal health outcomes, and just, reproductive health care. There's a lot.
Yeah.
So if anybody... Yeah.
I just think that just because of how you, like, the sex that you were born with, that shouldn't determine what rights you have and how you end up getting treated in society. Yeah,
it blows my mind, because I'm like still learning so much that when I saw this on the ballot on the questionnaire today, I was like, wait a second, I'm watching a show about the ERA in the 70s, and you're telling me that not all 50 states and territories have adopted this yet? Like,
yeah.
And why is nobody like pushing it to be like, okay, come on, guys, like, it's been over 50 years, like, we got to get on it. Like,
yeah.
So that's really disappointing.
Yeah.
Get on it, guys. And Chris Coons is like, yeah, I support it. I've got, people who support it that are backing me too. And it's like, okay, well then push it through. Like, get it done already.
Exactly. Like, get it ratified. Get it everywhere.
It's just wild. I just wonder if, like, Lauren Whitke's also been educating her people about the whole thing, or if she's just, like, focusing in on the wage. And that's the other thing, too, is, like, she's focusing in on the wage gap. She says it's a myth. And so that is, like, I feel like that's an audio bite. It's like, if you hear that and you side with her, you're like, okay, I'm in. I'll vote for her.
Yeah, really.
There's a lot of things that politicians will say that can, like, really grab people, and then they just decide, I don't have to do any more research. I agree with that one thing.
And that's enough.
Yeah, but we're doing our homework.
Yes, definitely.
So the last question on the Vote 411 Q&A says, do you see any need for campaign finance reform?
Yes. Wealthy interests serve as an incumbent protection racket for politicians who do the bidding of those interests.
And that's all she had to say about that.
Yeah.
I want to just touch on one question in Ballotpedia. Asks her what committees she wants to be on. So I think that'd be great for our listeners to know. It says that she wants to be on the Judiciary Committee, more particularly the Border Security and Immigration Subcommittee. Also, the Foreign Relations Committee, due to the relationship between foreign policy and immigration. I was surprised that she doesn't want to be on the FDA subcommittee, because I was like, you're talking about opioids a lot. Maybe she just, like, forgot that in this answer. I don't know.
Well, in one of her answers in the other, something I read that she has in like maybe her bio or on that Ballotpedia page, it kind of sounds like she sort of not blames, but thinks that immigration is the supports and causes the opioid crisis. And I think she kind of, to where if you end people coming in over the borders, you'll end in turn the opioid crisis.
Yeah,
where they're kind of hand in hand.
I don't know where we can find that in the text here, but I know I saw one of her videos on YouTube. She actually has been to the wall on the border a lot, which I commend. I'm like, that's great if you're not just talking about it, and she's actually going there and seeing what's going on. And this was back in like February or March before everything really shut down. And with her background in pharmaceuticals, she is knowledgeable. Like, she's not making stuff up, I don't think. But she says a lot of our opioids, she's not saying all of them, are coming from out of the country. And one of those ways is through the Mexico border. So she talked to a patrol member at the wall, and he was talking about like how many drugs he had stopped in one morning. So yeah, like not everything coming across the border is great. But we just have to, I hear a lot from other sources that are not like on her side that are like, it's not just coming through land though. And it doesn't seem like enough people are talking about protecting the waters and the air and the way that drugs are coming here or dangerous people are getting here and sex trafficking and stuff like that.
Yeah. I
agree.
Yeah,
there's a lot going on there. I'd be curious. I'm curious what's going to happen. I think she might have a fight here. I don't know.
I think so too. And then I also think like Greg, my boyfriend, he has a little sister who she is 20 or turning 20. So this is her first election that she's really participating in. And when she registered to vote, her parents are Republican, so they just told her like register as Republican. So I think also just like how I was when I was young with my first election, I didn't do much research, and I think where she might not necessarily vote Republican, but there's, I think, a lot of people that are just going to vote Republican because their parents vote Republican.
Yeah.
And won't actually, where she might not actually agree with these views, but will just vote for Republican because that's what she's been told and that's what she's registered to vote for.
Yeah, I mean, I hope she'll at least listen to this episode to make an educated vote about the senator. But yeah, I think that a lot of people grew up that way, and that's the funny thing about that comment about how like you don't talk about politics at the table, is I think especially when we're young, if we're around older people that are together and they might talk to each other a little bit, but like you're not learning, you're sort of just being told. And it's like, oh, well, I heard this name and that name growing up, so I think I'm supposed to vote this way. And I was trying to ask my sister about this. I was like, do you think we were like raised to be like Democrats or like liberals or anything? And she was like, we didn't talk about politics in the house. Like, I honestly couldn't tell you what elections my parents voted in. Half the time I don't know like which way they even land on some issues because we just don't push it. Now we do talk about it a lot more, like in the last probably 2 years. Now we're finally like, let's just talk about it because we know like we're gonna be family either way. Like nothing is we always like, one of the sayings that's really great for positive relationships is you never go to bed angry. And so I think my family is good with that. I think your family is great with that. Like, I love talking to your family. I feel like we can, like, speak our minds.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's definitely some debates that happen, but I don't think anybody ever takes anything, like, personally or as to the heart if somebody has, like, a different view than them.
Mm-hmm.
Or, which I think is always important, is, like, nobody's personally attacking you, for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to having different views politically and everything. And
sometimes it's more exciting. It's sometimes more exciting to have different views.
Yeah, I agree. That, and also like even if we all might I mean, I don't even know. Even if we all might be Democrats or more progressive and liberal, we still might have different views within that too.
Yeah.
To where, or some things might be important to one person and not quite as important to others.
Yeah, I'm definitely learning, because, I never chose Democrat or Republican before, except for this year, because I really felt left out from the primaries.
Yeah, because I've been independent since I registered to vote, and this, especially now going into this, I'm like, dang, I need to.
They almost put
Democrat.
and like they put too much pressure on it. Like I don't know how I feel about that issue, that being like a big component in voting in the primaries. But also it's like, okay, but if we want to have a say in it, we need to put a little less pressure on choosing a quote unquote choosing a party.
Yeah.
Because
I think that just pushes the bipartisanship as well, to where you can just only have two parties, and those are the only parties that are really gonna succeed, versus like if everybody can vote, you might end up with, in the primaries, you might end up with like different candidates to begin with.
Yeah. Because even the third parties, like if all they get to choose is like Democrat or Republican, then they might be like, okay, well, like, I don't consider myself Democrat or Republican, but I agree with what this person stands for, because I think that if they get in, then they'll agree with some of my viewpoints. But yeah, it's been so much to learn lately, because there's so many politicians reaching across the aisle too, which makes me really excited. I applaud them.
Yes, I agree.
It's very bold, and I hope we get more of that. We need some more nasty women, whether they identify as women or not. They can be nasty.
Yes, absolutely.
They can join our party.
Yes.
Do you have anything else to say on these two particular candidates?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm excited to see really how it ends up being, because I just think Lauren Whitke does have some good like grab points that will grab certain people's attention, and then she also has the younger point of view as well, since she's 32. So I think it's just, and some people, I think, because I think Chris Coons, he's been in office for a while, and
he took Joe Biden's seat.
Yeah.
So that's some time ago.
So like, and I think a lot of people might be like, well, it's time for a change. Like,
yeah.
So, and might think like, this isn't working, so let's try something else. And
it doesn't necessarily mean that, like if somebody, voted for Chris Coons, or they consider themselves Democratic and now they're going for Lauren, that it doesn't mean they think Chris Coons is like a bad person. It just might be like, maybe we just need a different perspective.
Yeah.
So I'd be happy to have you back on, like once the election's over, to see who fills this seat.
Yeah. That would be, that'll be cool. I would love to come back on.
Why did you hesitate?
No, I would love to come back on. I'm just nervous about the election in general.
Oh, yeah. I hear you. Well, I think that's a great segue to ask you, how are you being neighborly these days?
So I am being neighborly by, I just moved into an apartment this July. So, and now that I have a dog, I'm actually interacting with my neighbors a little more because I'm out and about. And I love my apartment complex because it's so diverse between like races, ages, like even just looking at the cars, like there's just such a diverse like cars. So you can kind of tell like socioeconomic status and everything, and families and not families. So, the people that I live near, they always have packages, and they always have packages coming in, and I'm always making sure that if they're not home, their packages are safe, and just kind of being respectful for everybody and staying high. And no matter what kind of day you're having or what the weather's like, I think it's always nice to smile and say hi, how are you, whenever you walk by anybody in your neighborhood, which is great.
Yeah, that's your little world, and you gotta take care of each other.
Yeah.
I really like that because it can be hard when you're in a new place to feel comfortable and make an impression, and you figured it out. You're like, I just need a dog.
Yeah, that's really what it is. So if anybody's feeling lonely, just get a dog.
How is the dog? Can we share your dog's name on the podcast?
Yeah, Tito.
Tito. How's Tito?
He's doing good. He's a solid 17 pounds now.
Wow.
Yeah, he's good though. He's
good, and he makes you happy.
Yes, he makes me so happy. He's such a cuddle bug half the time, and then when he's not, he's a crazy boy, and it's okay.
Oh, that is so cute. I love it. Well, citizens, please share what you think it means to be a citizen or a neighbor. I used to ask people to email me, but that's not been happening. So send me a DM on the Instagram to thisjess, THISJES. Also send me your puppy pics. I freaking love dogs, and I'll share them on my podcast, on my Instagram. I can't share them on like the audio podcast, but if you want, I'll share them on the video chat on my YouTube page. Please share this podcast with your friends all over the country so they can learn about the positions and history lessons, current happenings, and maybe even be inspired to start their own informative podcasts. I also just want to point out, like, before we finish, how huge your family is, because you have family in like so many different states.
Yeah.
Like, I'm married to your brother. We're in Philadelphia. You're in Delaware. Your other sister, Lauren, and her husband, Mikey, are in New York City. I'm going to talk to them next week on the podcast, awesome. Which Mikey said that their ballot is lame. It's not exciting. So, which is like the total opposite of the Delaware one. Yeah, and they're both from Delaware. Yeah, and then there's like family in like Maryland and Virginia and just like all over the place, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, I love it.
I'm hoping to like really express to people how different all the ballots are. Like, I think sometimes because we don't talk about politics, we just assume like, oh, everybody just is voting on the same thing this election.
Yeah.
We are not.
No.
We're all voting for president, vice president, and like that's the only thing we all have in common.
Yeah. So interesting.
So please share this podcast so other people can know like what everybody else's ballot looks like.
Yeah.
Oh boy. And we're like doing this to like help out your boyfriend Greg and help out our other friends who they have busy jobs and busy lives, but you have to want to know what's going on in order to cast your ballot. And so that's really exciting. We're helping out.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. Neighborly. Yeah.
This has been your friend Jess. Colleen, thank you so much for talking about the Delaware ballot with me. Did you want to say anything else before we go, like about yourself or whatever?
I don't think so. I think we got it covered.
I feel like when I hear like other podcasts, they're like, do you have anything to promote? But like,
I have nothing to promote.
In a pandemic.
Just be nice.
Oh, I love it. So on that note, will you lead us out, Colleen?
Yes, I'll see you around the neighborhood.